Welcome to this full summary study of a truly fascinating presentation titled Calendar of Obedience from the channel IvanS128. And right up top, if you want to dig into the original material for yourself, you can find a link to the source right down below in the description. Today, we're going completely off the standard grid to map out a really intricate ancient timekeeping system. I want you to imagine, just for a second, looking up at the night sky, but you aren't just seeing a random scattering of stars. Instead, you're actually reading the gears of a massive cosmic clockwork. Picture this beautiful array of glowing celestial gears where the sun, the moon, and the stars all lock together in this perfect, unyielding, divine synchronization. Well, this study argues that over the centuries, humanity has basically entirely lost track of how to read this grand astrolabe hanging right above our heads. So our goal today? We're going to decode it gear by gear.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the core premise of IvanS128's study goes way beyond just knowing when to plant crops, or when to celebrate a holiday, or when to flip the page on a desk calendar. According to this presentation, timekeeping is fundamentally a matter of divine obedience. The study proposes that understanding how to correctly number our days is actually a vital test. It's a test of whether we're willing to follow a divine path or if we're just going to stubbornly rely on our own human inventions and rough approximations. In a spiritual sense, decoding this calendar is literally likened to separating light from dark. It's seen as a way of aligning human actions perfectly with cosmic timing. And you know, this isn't just about ancient history either. For those who follow this study, it's about aligning your daily life, your weeks, and your years with a divine rhythm today.
To uncover exactly how all this works, we're going to follow a quick 6-part agenda for our investigation. First, we'll look at the calendar of obedience itself. Second, the roles of the 3 celestial witnesses. Third, decoding the biblical month. Fourth, the 13th month mystery. Fifth, how the star Spica signals the new year. And finally, prophetic timing and our conclusion.
Starting with Section 1, the calendar of obedience, a cosmic clockwork. Let's see how this ancient system views time. To really grasp the magnitude of this, you have to look at how the proposed biblical standard dramatically contrasts with the modern systems we literally live our lives by every single day. The study asserts that the original, true biblical calendar was lost over millennia. We're talking a mix of apostasy, human error, and just widespread cultural confusion. Just as the calendar had to be forcefully restored back in the days of Moses and the Exodus, the presentation argues it needs a complete restoration right now. And honestly, you can totally see why the confusion exists when you look at how we do things today. Take the Gregorian calendar, the one hanging in your kitchen and programmed into your smartphone. It is strictly a solar calendar. It's based entirely on the sun and completely ignores what the moon is doing. On the flip side of that, you have the Islamic calendar, which is strictly lunar. It completely ignores the sun. And what happens when you do that? Well, a purely lunar calendar actually causes its seasons to drift wildly over time. But IvanS128's study argues that a true biblical calendar refuses to compromise like that. It demands a flawless 3-part celestial mechanism where the sun, the moon, and the stars must all work together without a single gear out of place. Moving right along to Section 2, the 3 celestial witnesses, the sun, the moon, and the stars. The entire foundation for this cosmic clockwork actually goes all the way back to the creation account in Genesis 1:14. That text explicitly states that the lights in the firmament of heaven were created for signs, for seasons, which, by the way, in the original text translates to appointed times or feast days, for days, and for years. Let's break down the incredibly specific roles for each of these 3 witnesses. The sun, it governs the span of a single day and dictates the broader agricultural seasons, like winter and summer. The moon is strictly responsible for determining the months. Its phases mark the start of a month and the designated feast days within it. And the stars? They act as the overarching visual signs on the horizon that mark the start of the actual year. Now, what makes this super fascinating is the historical debate surrounding it. The study points out that some ancient apocryphal texts, like the Book of Jubilees, actually argued fiercely for a solar-only calendar, completely writing off the moon. But this study rigorously refutes that idea. By cross-referencing with the Psalms and the Book of Enoch, the presentation confirms that all 3, sun, moon, and stars, are absolute non-negotiable requirements to keep this mechanism running. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the study fundamentally redefines the start of the month itself. If you've ever looked into lunar calendars, you probably know there's a massive debate over whether a new moon means a bright full moon or a completely dark moon. Well, IvanS128 firmly rejects the full moon theory. And the reasoning here is beautifully grounded in just a simple observation of the natural world. Think about it. Everything in creation operates on a specific cycle of growth. A plant starts as a seed buried in total darkness, grows into full bloom, and then withers back to nothing. An animal, a human life, it all goes from nothing to fullness and back to nothing again. The study argues that the lunar cycle must operate on this exact same divine logic. Therefore, the true new moon begins in total absolute darkness, the zero light phase, when the sun and moon are in conjunction. It then reaches its visual fullness, mid-month, and finally wanes right back to the dark. All right, Section 3, decoding the biblical month, or the structure of time. Now that we've established that the month starts in pitch darkness, we can look at how the gears of the moon's phases intricately govern the structure of a single month. The study identifies 3 distinct types of days, and this is based on the text of Ezekiel 46. You have new moon days, working days, and Sabbaths, and the structure clicks together exactly like this. Day 1 of the month is a new moon day, which is actually treated as a day of rest, functioning a lot like a modern weekend day just to start the month off. Then, days 2 through 7 are your 6 standard working days. Following that, day 8 acts as the first official Sabbath rest day. This cycle of 6 working days followed by a Sabbath just continues throughout a 29 or 30-day month. To back this up, the study points to an incredible detail in the story of David and Saul from 1 Samuel. In that narrative, David is hiding out in a field for multiple days during a new moon feast to avoid Saul's wrath. The tension in the story is palpable, sure, but what makes it click chronologically is that it provides scriptural evidence that some months actually feature 2 consecutive new moon days at the end of the month. This creates an extended multi-day time of rest and feasting before the grueling work of the new month begins. To prove this exact alignment mathematically, the study looks to the Exodus 16 story of the manna from heaven. And let's slow down and really look at the math here, because the precision is wild. In this story, the Israelites complained on the 15th day of the month. That evening, God provided quail, and the very next morning, the 16th day, the manna began to fall. Now, the Israelites were instructed to gather this manna for exactly 6 days. So if they started on the 16th, the 6th day of gathering mathematically falls on the 21st day of the month. On that 21st day, they were told to gather a double portion. Why? Because the very next day, the 22nd, was declared a holy Sabbath where absolutely no gathering was allowed. Think about the precision there. If the 22nd is definitively a Sabbath, and the 15th was definitively a Sabbath, the math is completely inescapable. For the creator of this study, this mathematically proves that in every single biblical month, the Sabbaths are locked precisely to the lunar phases. They fall perfectly and predictably on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th days, without exception. Section 4, the 13th month mystery, synchronizing the heavens. Okay, so any calendar attempting to use both the sun and the moon has to deal with a massive point of mathematical friction in this celestial machine, and that friction comes down to the number 11. There is exactly an 11-day gap between a 365-day solar year and a 354-day lunar year. Literally, every year, the moon finishes its cycle 11 days before the sun does. If you don't adjust for this astronomical drift, the consequences for a society are huge. Without a correction, your calendar is going to slide completely out of season. Within just a decade, your spring planting festivals would drift right into the dead of winter, and harvest festivals would land in the spring. It would be absolute chaos for an agricultural society. So how does this ancient divine system recalibrate itself to prevent that from happening? Well, the answer lies in what is mathematically known as the Metonic cycle. This is this brilliant, naturally occurring 19-year celestial alignment period, where the moon completes exactly 235 lunar months, returning to the exact same phase and position against the backdrop of the stars. To keep the solar and lunar years perfectly synced up and prevent those seasons from drifting, a 13th month basically must be added to the calendar every 2 to 3 years. Now, this is where things get highly contentious. The modern Jewish calendar actually uses a mathematically calculated Metonic cycle based around the spring equinox. However, IvanS128 argues that drawing a line in the sand based on equinox math is a human alteration. It's an intrusion of human logic onto a divine clock. According to this presentation, in the true, uncorrupted biblical calendar, the addition of that 13th month should never, ever be calculated on paper. It must be dictated entirely by direct visual observation of the stars. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why a 13-month year is biblically necessary, just by looking at the text itself. The study highlights 2 major scriptural timelines that simply cannot physically exist on a standard 12-month calendar. Let's walk through the math real quick. First, the prophet Ezekiel was commanded to perform a physical demonstration lasting 430 days, plus an additional 7-day period of astonishment. That totals exactly 437 days. The text states this entire event happened between the 4th month of one year and the 6th month of the following year. But a standard lunar year is only 354 days. You physically cannot fit 437 days into that time frame unless that specific year contained a 13th month to bridge the gap. It just doesn't work. Similarly, let's look at Noah. The detailed dates given for the duration of Noah's flood add up to exactly 394 days within a single calendar year. Again, standard solar calendars max out at 365. Lunar calendars max out at 354. Only an ancient calendar system that periodically and intentionally inserts a 13th month can accurately accommodate these massive historical scriptural accounts. Moving into Section 5, Spica, and the new year, the ultimate cosmic sign. We are now reaching the true visual climax of the study. This is the exact moment where the stars finally step in to lock the entire calendar into place. The book of Exodus identifies the first month of the year as Abib. But what does the word Abib actually mean? Well, linguistically, it translates to grain head or a head of grain. Now, historically, a lot of people have linked this to the physical, terrestrial ripening of barley crops down here on Earth. However, the study points out a massive contradiction with that idea. Genesis 1:14 explicitly states that the stars are for signs, not terrestrial agriculture. So the presentation theorizes something incredible. It suggests that Abib is actually a direct celestial reference to the star Spica. Spica is the Latin name for the absolute brightest star in the constellation Virgo. And guess what Spica literally translates to? Ear of grain. It visually represents the glowing head of grain held firmly in the Virgin's right hand in the night sky. So, how do you actually determine the new year using this celestial gear? The mechanics are just breathtaking. First, you wait for the sun and the moon to reach conjunction, creating the total darkness of the dark moon. Then, just after twilight, as the sun's light fades away, you look to the eastern horizon. If the constellation Virgo, and specifically that bright star Spica, is rising into view as the sky darkens, that is your celestial sign. The new year has officially begun. But if Spica is entirely below the horizon, hidden completely from sight, you must wait an entire month, which triggers that elusive 13th month we talked about, and then check the horizon again at the next dark moon. I want you to really lean in and picture this precise visual alignment in your mind. A completely dark moon setting quietly in the west, while the glowing starry outline of Virgo, holding a spike of grain, rising majestically in the east. The study insists this is the ultimate, unchangeable, divine mechanism established to mark time flawlessly across all eras, from Adam to Jesus, right down to us today.
And finally, Section 6, prophetic timing and conclusion. Having mapped out the historical and mechanical rules of this celestial machine, IvanS128 takes a pretty sharp pivot to explore its heavy, modern prophetic implications. The presentation traces cycles of massive, devastating historical tragedy directly to specific dates on this exact celestial calendar, outlining a hauntingly repeating historical pattern of destruction. And the emotional weight of these dates is pretty staggering. For instance, the study notes that on the 9th day of the 4th month, King Zedekiah's army fell, and national leadership was completely and utterly lost in a bloodbath. Then, devastatingly, on the 9th day of the 5th month, the glorious first temple was burned to the ground. But history didn't stop there, right? It repeated itself centuries later when the second temple was also destroyed on the exact same mathematical date, the 9th day of the 5th month. And by the first day of the 7th month, the final battered remnant of the people was exiled into Egypt. The study tracks these dates meticulously to show a divine rhythm of historical apostasy and inescapable consequence. So, why does all of this matter today? Because, according to this presentation, if history is going to repeat itself, it will do so on this exact clock, not the one hanging in your kitchen. So the crucial point is that IvanS128 believes the broader world and even deeply devout modern religious calendars are currently miscalculating these true historical dates due to a complete lack of understanding of that Spica alignment. Because of this fatal miscalculation, the study suggests that future pivotal events, potentially major global collapses in leadership or massive societal shifts mirroring those ancient exiles, will ultimately unfold perfectly on this exact restored celestial calendar. Which leaves us to ponder this final, chilling question as we conclude this full summary study. If the unyielding gears of time are written perfectly in the stars, totally unchangeable by human hands, are we even watching the right clock? It's an absolutely fascinating look at how ancient texts and cosmic movements intersect to shape our reality. I highly recommend checking out IvanS128's original in-depth study to explore this further, and again, you'll find that link waiting for you in the description below. Thank you for joining me for this full summary study. Keep your eyes on the stars and keep asking great questions.